American direction of policy is concerned?
Confusion may be a polite word for chaos. And I think you just have to look at and speak to business people. I mean, listening to the president is one thing, regardless of who the president is. The question is, who are the people making the deals? Who are the people hiring workers? Who are the consumers purchasing? And how do they feel? And I think if you canvass this economic landscape, you would find that most people are very nervous, at least the people that I come in contact with. And I'm not even talking as a professional, just even walking in stores, talking with friends. Everyone is very nervous.
And I think another thing here is when you speak to some officials in government and so forth, there are still quite a few appointments that haven't been made yet. This is not a fully staffed Donald Trump government yet. And it does mean, to the point that we were just hearing, that you have a situation whereby it's not as though Donald Trump has the complete team ready to go. There's also a situation where lots of, Donald Trump's cabinet, who we know are meeting today, are still jockeying for position. Everyone's working out who is the closest, who has his ear, how to work him. And I think that just adds to that sense of confusion as to what might happen next, which, as we all know, is, really what hurts business confidence going forward.
I am JohnPienaar with Drive on Times Radio. We're coming to you live from here in Washington, D.C., just a stone's throw, not that you throw stones at the White House, but a very short walk to the White House. We're in the excellent company of Katy Balls, the Times' new Washington editor, and we have now been joined by Dr. Harry Broadman here in our pop-up studio, the former U.S. Assistant Trade Representative and a Chief of Staff in the past of the President's Council of Economic Advisors under Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. It's quite a CV. Welcome to you, Harry.
Thank you, John.
Can we start with the latest news from the Department of Commerce? So the economy shrank by 0.3% in the first quarter of the year. And to be, I guess, clear and fair, you can't directly attribute that to a policy of trade war and tariffs, which is now just kicking in. But it will, won't it, enhance worries about the state of the economy in future in the next quarter?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a function of the trade war in the sense that people were expecting this, and so people were stocking up.
Yeah.
Right. And so that has a negative impact on GDP growth. But I think you're quite right. But the real test is what's going to be happening in the next quarter. And one of the problems with the buying up of supplies prior is you may not have as much purchasing ahead. Right. So that will also have an effect on that number.
Okay. Now, when these questions are raised, and they're raised almost hourly now, certainly since we've been here and a long time before that, the president says it's all going to work out in the end. He's on the case when it comes to trade deals. He said the other day that he's on the case with 200 trade deals. And as I keep saying, I'm going to stop saying this because it's a little bit too easy. There are only 195 countries on the planet, but there's no sign of any of them having concluded a trade deal. The president, it seems, if he's going to act by modifying his policy in the light of economic pessimism, there's no sign of that happening.
I think you're quite right. I mean, I was as a former trade negotiator. I said, well, there's not 200 states with whom you can negotiate, but I do think the fact is that he's not able and or willing to show, well, I've done this agreement with such and such a country and this country is quite telling. Yeah. And I think it only feeds into the nervousness that businesses have, that consumers have, that workers have, and our trading partners have. Okay, so what is this guy actually doing?
Yeah. Maybe the worry from the point of those who want to see some sort of change in direction, a twitch in direction, an alteration, is President Trump shows no sign of accepting that his argument that every dollar spent on importing goods into America is a dollar ripped off from America. That's his fundamental belief. And Katy, there's no sign of that changing right now.
No, and you still have, a large, sizable group in Donald Trump's orbit who believe tariffs are the correct policy. I think lots of people will now say, it's the correct policy, is what we need to, level the playing field, America first. But you could finesse it around the edges and we wouldn't have done it quite like perhaps they did do it with some of the calculations around it. But I think when we're looking ahead to the deals on the table, I think there is a sense that to show momentum, to get a couple across the line, to at least make other countries feel as though they have to give more to get
something
there.
To cheer, something to boast
Exactly. About. And, we've heard that some countries, Japan's been talked up and others could be, near the front of the queue. I think that's what a lot of people are looking at, because there is unhappiness among some of Donald Trump's natural supporters about what is going on at the moment.
Yeah, Harry Broadman, I'm just looking at the president's latest tweet. I said latest tweets. I read this about 20 minutes ago. I don't know how many he may have posted in the last 20 minutes. But he says that the stock market is Biden's, not Trump's. He said companies are starting to move into the USA in record numbers. Is there any evidence for that?
I haven't seen it, and it also depends on what you mean by companies. It could be mom and pop stores. I'm not sure that it's major corporations. I mean, and producers, and not just service, organizations. No, I think his biggest problem is he's not well staffed to produce economically meaningful statistics to make his case. That's his first problem. And his probably second, but maybe even more important problem is the uncertainty that he is engendering. That's far more corrosive than the tariffs, or not tariffs. Yeah. It's that no one knows what is ahead on the road. Is the road straight? Is it curvy? Are we going to take a left turn, a right turn? Is it going to be a U-turn? And that in and of itself is quite problematic.
Yeah. I'm going to turn now to both of you to, I don't know, maybe the most critical element of this global trade war, and that is, of course, the president and the United States versus China. Now, it was his target from the start. His aim, I don't think there's any disputes about that, his aim was to tilt the balance of global trade so America had the sort of strength that China enjoys now in the tech market and so many others. Now, the president gave an interview. Let's have a quick listen back to this. President Trump talking to the US network ABC just last night. I think we can perhaps hear that now.
We still have 145% tariffs on China. Your Treasury Secretary said we basically have an embargo on China.
Look, you're trying to say something's going to happen, Terry.
No, okay. Well,
nothing's going to happen.
You know business.
Terry,
I want to ask you.
I do know business.
Yes, so 145% tariffs on China, and that's good. Basically an embargo.
They deserve it.
It'll raise prices on everything from electronics to clothing to building houses.
You don't know that. You don't know whether or not China's going to eat it.
That's mathematics.
China probably will eat those tariffs, but at 145, they basically can't do much business with the United States.
Well, the President, Harry Broadman and Katy Balls, he seems pretty content with the state of this war, but it's in a state of absolute confusion, isn't it, Harry, at least as far as American direction of policy is concerned?
Confusion may be a polite word for chaos. And I think you just have to look at and speak to business people. I mean, listening to the president is one thing, regardless of who the president is. The question is, who are the people making the deals? Who are the people hiring workers? Who are the consumers purchasing? And how do they feel? And I think if you canvass this economic landscape, you would find that most people are very nervous, at least the people that I come in contact with. And I'm not even talking as a professional, just even walking in stores, talking with friends. Everyone is very nervous.
And I think another thing here is when you speak to some officials and government and so forth, there are still quite a few appointments that haven't been made yet. This is not a fully staffed Donald Trump government yet. And it does mean, to the point that we were just hearing, that you have a situation whereby it's not as though Donald Trump has the complete team ready to go. There's also a situation where lots of, Donald Trump's cabinet, who we know are meeting today, are still jockeying for position. Everyone's working out who is the closest, who has his ear, how to work him. And I think that just adds to that sense of confusion as to what might happen next, which, as we all know, is, really what hurts business confidence going forward.
Yeah, I wonder, Harry, just trying to avoid appearing to be the angel of doom in this entire conversation. I mean, and look at some way that it might work out better than the deepest pessimists imagine. Donald Trump is looking for deals. He hasn't signed the deals that he says he's signed. The negotiations aren't at the stage that he would like everyone to believe that they are at, but he is looking for deals. And he's talking to countries that want deals. They will, in large numbers, Harry, won't they be offering trade-offs, access to those markets in exchange for blunting the edge of American tariffs. And when that starts happening, well, it will have an effect of as I wait, just maybe making the prospect of inflation less than it might otherwise have been. It will certainly give the president more to talk about, and there will be some companies bringing their business back, because some have done that.
Well, it really depends on what is the nature of the deal. If the deal could be that we're going to have higher tariffs, that some countries say, okay, we'll do this for you, but you'll have to do this for us in the future.
Yes.
Okay, so what kind of ice cream are we ending up with? Vanilla, chocolate? Just coming to a deal with tariffs.
Yes,
is bereft of the context and the composition of the tariff. If the agreed to tariffs are extremely high,
yes,
That's not good news. Just
Yeah.
because there's certainty, there's not a sign of relief. Oh, now we have a deal.
Yeah.
Let's look at the deal. That's the issue.
Yeah. Look, I guess this is one of those questions that requires one to have some sort of a magical insight into the president's psyche. But I don't know how many people, if anybody can claim to have that. But he believes in himself. He has an invincible sense of the rightness of his arguments. Almost invincible, because he watches markets and he watches the opinion polls. And even though he will never concede, Katy, that he's done any kind of retreats, we've seen pauses introduced at short notice. We've seen tariffs reduced at short notice. Maybe that's a kind of disorganization and chaos, but it has had some effect. The markets aren't always entirely in a mess. And that we could get more of that.
Yeah, and we do know, as you say, that when it comes to big business, banks, there is a way where they can say, oh, no, you do need to calm things down a bit here. And also the polls, when Donald Trump takes angrily to his social media accounts and will say, this poll is garbage, I don't trust your pollster, as he has done recently, that also shows that he is bothered. And that does mean that there is going to be a point, if this keeps up, where he starts to worry about what it means for his long-term poll rating.
Quite. I mean, he's a president he's the master, a genius at winning an election in the United States. Now, maybe there's more to learn about running the United States. That doesn't mean it's going to be impossible to learn those lessons. And we could see, can't we, Harry? I know we're doing a bit of clairvoyance here. It is possible to conceive of changes in directions, a slight one here, a bigger one there, which stabilizes his presidency, which stabilizes his popularity and keeps him in the political game heading into the midterms. That is possible?
It is possible, I think, but unless his behavior changes, I think that's an unlikely scenario. I think one of the points that you've touched on, John, is how is he governing and who is he listening to? And it's very clear when you listen to the Treasury Secretary, the Commerce Secretary, the Council of Economic Advisors folks, they're all deferring to him.
Yeah.
And he's not surrounded, like most presidents are, by smart people who are willing to tell him or her, whoever the president may be, bad news as well as good news.
Yeah.
And they're intimidated of advising the president.
Yes.
That's a very bad sign. And I think businesses are not stupid. They understand that.
Yes, yes. In the first term of Donald Trump's presidency, he had people around him who he didn't like contradicting him and telling him what he couldn't do, but they did tell him that. They all got sacked for it, but they were there doing that. Now there's none of them, and the person who's got to give Donald Trump advice that he doesn't want to hear is Donald Trump. The question is, when that happens, will Donald Trump listen to Donald Trump?
Well, I think there are different voices, and for example, Scott Bessent, we know, is probably one of the more moderate voices, if you're going to put it on the scale.
He changed the tariff policy.
Yeah,
briefly.
and these stories of people being locked in cupboards or bathrooms so as to get the message across.
I haven't heard that one.
Oh yeah, there's been some reports of what you do to get Donald Trump's ear. Still a work in progress, compared to Nabarro and others who we know are more hardline on the issue. So I think there are still some voices of moderation around it. But to the point I was made earlier, it still feels to me as though the dust is settling on who is the most influential when it comes to Trump's orbit.
Fascinating stuff. It's a story in progress, a presidency in progress. Dr. Harry Broadman, lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
And Katy, as always, let's talk again very soon, maybe in the space of a few minutes.